And we're going to start by introducing ourselves to you. For those of you who don't know us, we are Tosa Sustainability Services, a startup with a mission to empower companies to make the best sustainable and ESG decisions. We are a team of 4 members here. You're going to see 3 of us here inside the webinar today. Myself, I'm Marwa Hanouf. I am a founder, director, and CEO in Tosa. I'm also a postdoctoral fellow at University of Calgary in Alberta, Canada. I'm joined with Alejandro Padilla Rivera, who's the founder, director, and CTO in Tosa, and also a postdoctoral fellow at University of Calgary. I have also with me here Getachew Asefa, who's a founder, director, and advisor in Tosa, and a professor at University of Calgary. And our 4th team member is Ian Gates, who's the founder, director, and advisor in Tosa also, and a professor at University of Calgary. As a team, we combine different experiences and multiple years of experience in terms of life cycle assessment, sustainability assessment, social life cycle assessment, environmental, social, and governance assessment, as well as sustainability energy systems and technology development. As a startup, we are originated from University of Calgary in Alberta, Canada, and we have been recently formed in Calgary in early 2022. We provide an intuitive computer-based sustainability and ESG plus software tool that evaluates the whole sustainability performance of products, services, and corporate operations based on a standardized lifecycle assessment method. As a startup, we do offer not only software licenses, but also we do offer other services, including courses, training sessions, webinars, consultancy services on different areas on lifecycle assessment, social lifecycle assessment, lifecycle sustainability assessment, ESG, as well as circular economy. And recently, our startup has launched a series of free sustainability and lifecycle assessment webinars that are open for academics, business leaders, decision makers, and policymakers. Our webinars will cover a wide range of topics from triple bottom line thinking to lifecycle assessment, lifecycle sustainability assessment, and social lifecycle assessment. And today's webinar is the first of this series of lifecycle assessment and sustainability webinars. Each webinar will be recorded and will be available to you on our website. And when this webinar, you will receive the link for it also in a follow-up email after the webinar, where you're going to see the link and it will be available for you to watch it later. In each webinar, we're going to start with a presentation for around 35 to 40 minutes by Tosa team, and will be followed by a Q&A section where we're going to address all your questions. I would encourage everyone, before we start with the agenda for the first webinar, I would like to encourage everyone who has a question, feel free to post it in the chat section during the presentation if you would like, and we will make sure to address that in the Q&A section. But also you will have the opportunity to raise your hand in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar, and we'll give you the opportunity to just ask your question in person, unmute yourself and ask it. So you can do it in either way you are feeling comfortable with. So let's start directly with our first webinar here, where we're going to talk about beyond environmental assessment and the importance of life cycle thinking for decision makers. We're going to start with an introduction, talking a bit about why we need to go to life cycle thinking and going beyond environmental assessment. We're going to introduce the concept of life cycle thinking, the goals of life cycle thinking, walk you through some of the application of life cycle thinking, and we're going to zoom in a bit into some life cycle tools, talking about life cycle assessment, life cycle costing, social life cycle assessment, and life cycle sustainability assessment. We're going to go through a couple of case studies that have adopted the life cycle sustainability assessment, talking a bit about the challenges here, and we're going to end with some final remarks and open the Q&A section. So let's start directly first with the definition of sustainable development, which is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Looking at this definition, we know that sustainable development is not only focusing on the environmental dimension. It is about this interrelationships between the 3 dimensions. It is about the triple bottom line, the interrelationships between the environmental, the economic, and the social systems. So it is about the 3 Ps, the profit, planet, and people. And in working toward achieving the sustainable development, we are confronted with many complexities here. There are pressure on companies, social pressures from different stakeholder groups, regulatory gaps, uncertainty in the objectives and the goals that we need to achieve, as well as some lack in the tools to measure our progress, and uncertainty or insufficiency in the framework to analyze these complex problems because they are dealing with the 3 dimensions of sustainability. And this is where the 17 Sustainable Development Goals have been introduced to help us being reference points to track and monitor our progress toward achieving the sustainable development. But in working to achieve these targets and these goals, everyone has a role to play in order to integrate sustainability in their decision-making. So everyone has to integrate sustainability in their decision-making at different scales and at different levels, from the individual to the company, to the national level, and to the global level. And this is where it becomes a bit complicated to integrate sustainability in its 3 dimensions into our decision-making. This is the question that we are asking ourselves here, is how to incorporate sustainability in its 3 dimensions into our decision-making so we can all work together toward achieving the sustainable goals, the targets, and the sustainable development. When making sustainable decisions or when integrating sustainability into our decisions, we have to make sure that there are a couple of points that we should keep in mind. The first one is to avoid the creating new problems when solving others. If we focus only on reducing carbon emissions, we have to make sure not to create a poverty problem or inequality problem. So focusing on environmental problems while not having another holistic picture on the economic and social problems, we may create those problems on the other hand. And this is not a sustainable decision. The other point would be to as well avoid displacing impacts from one stage to another. As we all know, a decision has multiple stages. Focusing only on the manufacturing stage, let's say, we may end up creating another problem in the end of life stage. And if we do that, this is not going to be a sustainable decision. So these are the 2 points that we have to keep in mind when making sustainable decisions or when integrating sustainability into our decision-making. And in doing that, this is where we have to go beyond environmental thinking. This is where we have to have this sustainability transition and not have this carbon channel vision, focusing only on one part of the problem, let's say on carbon emissions. This is where we have to have this transition in thinking from the environmental protection to this triple bottom line, to this life cycle thinking, handling and covering the 3 dimensions of sustainability, but also all stages of our decisions. In this way, we can avoid the problem shifting from one dimension to another or from one stage to another, and as well sub-optimization between the 3 dimensions of sustainability. This is the importance of life cycle thinking concept. It is a way to incorporate sustainability in its 3 dimensions in decision-making. And right now, we're going to introduce for you more the life cycle thinking concept with Alejandro and talking a bit about the applications of this life cycle thinking.
Thank you very much, Marwa. Okay, but what is life cycle thinking? The life cycle thinking is go beyond on the traditional assessment, focus on a specific life cycle stage. Most of the assessment are only related to production side or manufacturing, and life cycle thinking is go beyond. It means include all the entire cycle of a product, service, or system, and not only covering the environmental part, but also the social and economical aspect. And by bringing life cycle thinking to mindsets of decision makers, the life cycle initiative, for example, it's enhancing the sustainability of their decisions. And this is one way to achieve the sustainable development goal faster and more efficiently. And regarding the goals of life cycle thinking, there can be many goals, but we consider that 3 of the most important goals of this life cycle thinking is The first one is informed selections, and it means we need to look for unintentional impacts of our actions. For example, damaging a natural ecosystem or inadvertently supporting unfair labor condition and waste, and take some actions and to prevent those impacts. For example, purchasing office paper for sustainability managed forests, our coffee certified fair trade. And the second one is making choice for the long term. And for example, consider to reduce a product resource use and emissions to the environment, as well, and improve the socioeconomic performance through life cycle. This may facilitate, for example, the links between economic, social, and environmental dimension within an organization and through its entire value chain. And the third goal is improving the entire system, not only a specific part of the system. And this is achieved by avoiding decisions that fix one environmental problem that can cause another unexpected or costly environmental problem, like, for example, mitigating air pollution, yet increasing water pollution, or any other thing. Life cycle thinking helps to avoid these shifting problems from one life cycle stage, to another one, from one specific geographic region to another one. So this is not only focusing in one specific, but consider all of the impacts associated to the life cycle stages. And in this regard, there have been many applications in all over the world. These are only a couple of examples where life cycle thinking has been applied. For example, it has been applied in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, in North America, in all over the world. And there have been different applications for different companies, not only multinational or big company, but also some familiar businesses or small, medium enterprises in developing worlds. And this is an example of where life cycle thinking has been applied at a multinational. This life cycle thinking, it's an example of India Glycols Limited. In this case, life cycle thinking has been placed front at the center of the company ambitious strategy, and to make its supply chain and its operations more environmental friendly. This is not fit for a petrochemicals company, but with the broad application of life cycle thinking, this company aims to become a veritable petrochemicals pioneer. We know that in the global chemical sectors, companies are increasing the aware of the gradual shift towards a more clean manufacturing or improving the sustainability, and more businesses than ever poised to meet the industry needs for environmental friendly or responsible products or productions. However, there have been some companies that are adopting this life cycle thinking, but this is not the case of this company. This company is adopting this life cycle thinking to promote different product or processes to make it cleaner. And life cycle thinking, it's not only applied to big national or small medium enterprises. Life cycle thinking can be applied to our daily decisions. For example, in this case, when we purchase any goods, for example, phrases, we know that transportation or it's an important matter. Why? Because we should always try to buy things that are produced locally. Why? Because if we take in consideration the transportation, we matter what's happening not only in the production side, but what's happening before the manufacturing is being, but also what's happening after the manufacturing or the transportation, or in this case, the phrases. So we need to matter what's happening in all life cycle stages, but not only in the environmental dimension or environmental part. For example, we need to ask ourselves what's happening when the phrases are produced, are there any illegal labor? Or are there a child working in these agricultural farms? Or what's happening, for example, with the packaging after it is disposed? Are they causing any damages to the water, to the air? So we need to consider not only the environmental part, but also the social and in all life cycle stages of the production. This is another example where life cycle thinking has been applied. It's a fishing industry. And the fishing industry is one of the industries recognized by the importance of long-term planning and decisions. It's a key part of life cycle thinking. And in this case, they are planning or they are considering a long-term policies to avoid damages to the ecosystems. When life cycle thinking inform different decisions, for example, electricity generation, they can, for example, fix one environmental problem while reducing any other damaging or any other problem. So in this case, they are switching from nuclear power generation to coal-fired generation. And this is preventing nuclear waste, but also releases to mercury damaging the ecosystem and human populations. And talking about a little bit more about cost, because it's life cycle thinking, it's not only environmental or social, it's also a cost. This is another example of chemical suppliers that they identify the life cycle costing of manufacturing, purchasing, using, and disposing the chemical supply. And they identify that some of the costs are hidden costs. So these costs are not expected costs. So they try to create a new policy in order to avoid these hidden costs for customers. So in this case, they are reducing the customer costs and managing risk to workers, health and safety also, and mitigating environmental impacts and providing long-term contract for business. So in this case, it can be cost, but at the same time, it can be an environmental problem. And taking into consideration the life cycle thinking, it's avoiding between cost or economic to the environmental. So if we consider both dimensions, we can avoid this shifting, or we can avoid mitigating one problem and increasing another one. So life cycle thinking is considered like environmental, social, and economic through the entire life cycle processes. And in these regards, there have developed many tools to evaluate this life cycle perspective of life cycle thinking. In this case, we are focusing in one of the most important, or three of the most important life cycle tools. For environmental, we are focusing, or we are giving more explanation about we are giving more explanation with environmental life cycle assessment. For the social, we have the social cycle assessment, while in the economic side, we have the economic life cycle costing. In the environmental life cycle assessment, this is the most known tool for evaluate the environmental life cycle perspective. This life cycle assessment is a methodology that integrates, that evaluates, that assess any product, service, either companies, through the entire life cycle from cradle to grave, considering the extraction of materials, transportation, manufacturing, use, disposal, and end of life. It's a compilation and evaluation of inputs, outputs, and potential environmental impacts. And every day it's considered more and more data, and can be assessed many different product systems or processes. And life cycle thinking, it's also a way to structurate different parts of the life cycle stages. It's a tool that can track the performance and also highlight specific hotspots in the entire supply chain. And of course, it's not a cure for all environmental problems, but can fix most of them. A life cycle assessment begins with the cradle, and then continue with the transportation, the use, the manufacture, and end of life. Then we move to the economic life cycle costing. In this case, life cycle costing is very similar to life cycle assessment. It considers the different life cycle stages, but unlike the environmental cycle assessment, the economic life cycle costing considers all costs associated with the life cycle stages. And it can include one or more actors in the entire supply chain. There are at least 3 different life cycle costing: the conventional, the environmental, and the societal. In this case, we are only taking into consideration, or we are providing information regarding the conventional life cycle costing. The conventional cycle costing is to a large extent the most used and current in practice in many governments, firms, industries, and is based on purely economic evaluations and consider various costs associated with a product that is born directly by a given actor. And life cycle costing, or the conventional life cycle costing, is more likely to be used as an intern tool. It can include externalities, but in conventional life cycle costing, we are not including externalities. We are only included direct and indirect costs. And then when we move to the social dimension, we find the social life cycle assessment. The social cycle assessment is a methodology that can assess a societal and socioeconomic aspect of products, services, and systems, and they can not only evaluate the negative, that environmental assessment focus on negative impacts, but also it can evaluate or assess the positive impacts of a product, organization, or any system. In this case, the life cycle assessment consider not only one stakeholder. It taking in consideration the value chain actors, consumers, the society, children also, workers, and community through the life cycle stage. So from the acquisition of raw materials to the end of life.
The combination of all the 3 tools that Alejandro talked about right now is what's called life cycle sustainability assessment. So this combination of life cycle assessment, life cycle costing, and social life cycle assessment is what we call life cycle sustainability assessment. This is the evaluation of all environmental, economic, and social impacts in decision-making processes. And this combination will help us to assess each of the 3 dimensions of sustainability. So the life cycle assessment will be assessing the environmental impacts, the life cycle costing, the economic dimension, the economic impacts, the social life cycle assessment, the society, which is the social impacts. And then LCSA will be able to assess the sustainability, all the 3 dimensions of sustainability together. Now you're going to see popping up at your end 2 polls of questions where we wanted to see your inputs here on if you have used any of these life cycle tools in a business or public decision-making context before, and if you are considering applying any of these tools in a business or public decision-making context. And we will be sharing the results of these 2 questions with you once we have it. To continue a bit, now we're going to touch base on 2 case studies that have conducted life cycle sustainability assessment. We're going to do that a bit quickly here, and the point would be to show you how life cycle sustainability assessment can help us in our decision making. The first case study here is assessing the sustainability performance of 3 European beef production systems. And this was done using life cycle sustainability assessment. The results can show us the environmental impacts of the 3 European beef production systems, as well as the social and economic impacts. And the results, with these results, they were able to inform the farmers' decisions on which of these 3 production systems is more sustainable. What are the trade-offs? And they were able as well to inform the debate that's happening in Europe on the most sustainable beef production. When we say the debate, so that means they were able to inform policymakers, producers, all actors who are interested in this, in figuring out what is the most sustainable beef production system. And as a main highlight here, they were able to know that there are trade-offs between the 3 dimensions of sustainability when they were assessing these 3 European beef production systems. And that highlighted the importance to consider not only environmental impacts, but also social and economic indicators when we are assessing those 3 European beef production systems. So they were able to identify the trade-offs and identify possibility to manage these trade-offs to have the most sustainable European beef production system. Another case study that we want to touch base here on is regarding the hydrogen. The hydrogen, which is gaining high interest right now in our way toward achieving a sustainable economy. And in this case study, they were benchmarking the sustainability impacts of 2 renewable options against the conventional way of producing hydrogen. Exactly, they were benchmarking the sustainability of wind and biomass-based hydrogen against the conventional hydrogen for an effective, sustainable decision-making. So this was done by assessing the environmental, social, and economic impacts of the 3 ways of producing hydrogen using specific indicators on the 3 dimensions of sustainability, on the environmental, economic, and social. And 2 main highlights here were done based on this assessment. The first one, they were able to identify which stage is responsible as a main source of impact, the driving of energy and biomass production. But also another highlight here is that none of the 2 renewable options is fully sustainable alternative. When we say fully sustainable alternative, that means on the 3 dimensions of sustainability. And by having this result, they were able to identify what needs to be done, what actions need to be done to improve the sustainability performance of the 2 renewable options, to have them as fully sustainable options, renewable options, not only on the environmental dimension, but also on the economic and the social. One of these actions would be, for example, to improve the technical efficiency, reducing the labor requirements. So the specific actions that need to be done to have or to improve the sustainability performance of the 2 renewable options. And in this way, we can see that having this holistic perspective when assessing our options would make sense to have to create sustainable options, not only on the environmental dimension, but also on the 3 dimensions. So we saw that with these 2 case studies, how life cycle sustainability assessment can help us in different ways in assessing the sustainability performance and in choosing how it can help us in our decision making here. So it can help us to identify improvements, for example, that needs to be done to improve the sustainability performance of our options, of our technologies, of our product systems. It can help us to identify trade-offs, as we have saw in one of the case studies, and how we can manage the trade-offs between the 3 dimensions. It can help by promoting awareness on specific sustainability issues. What are the sustainability issues in our supply chain and how we can solve these issues? It can help us in comparing different options and choosing the most sustainable one not only on the environmental, but also economic and social. We can even inform policymakers on the best sustainable option so they can create some policy incentive, and we can encourage the application of those sustainable options. We can simulate innovation. We can communicate the results with consumers to raise the credibility, or even informing labeling initiatives so consumers can choose the most sustainable one. All these are kind of benefits that we can have from the application of life cycle sustainability assessment. can be seen simple, but yes, it is a challenging process. It's a challenging process with the existence of different approaches, different databases in relation to the 3 dimensions of sustainability, but also separate software tools that exist in the market to assess each of the 3 dimensions of sustainability. And as you may guess, there is a large amount of data collection associated with the LCSA application. And when it comes to the interpretation of the 3 dimensions of results, in a holistic way, it becomes a bit more challenging. This is why the importance of having this LCSA process a bit more simplified as well as automated for everyone, so we can encourage more the application of this process in our decision-making process. And this is what we try to address inside TOSA. Inside TOSA, with our sustainability and ESG software tool that we are providing, we are addressing the challenges that I just talked about. This software tool, which is an easy-to-use software tool that we have inside TOSA, evaluates the whole sustainability performance, covering the 3 dimensions of sustainability of any product, service, or corporate operations, based on this standardized lifecycle sustainability assessment. While having this process automated and simplified inside TOSA, we are combining the advantages of applying LCSA, so the power of it, but also have it simplified inside our software tool, where everything, all the process is guided step by step, and all the databases, generic databases, high quality databases, are connected inside the software to make it as simple as possible, and then have the results automated and shown for the user in an automated way. The figures or the graphs that you are seeing here are the results of one case study, which is the LCSA, or Lifecycle Sustainability Assessment of Oil and Gas Industry in Canada, and this was conducted using TOSA software tool. We're not going to go into the details of this case study because hopefully this will be presented in a separate webinar where we're going to talk in details about the application of Lifecycle Sustainability Assessment inside TOSA, with all the details of how the data is integrated, how the process works, and how the results work. But what you are seeing here in a very quick way is the environmental impacts of the oil and gas industry, and which impact category is responsible for the largest percentage, as well the distribution of these impacts, the economic impacts between the different processes, as well the social impacts of the oil and gas industry along its life cycle stages, and which social areas are responsible for the largest negative impact, are the higher, or have the highest risk, negative risk, I should say. So by having these 3 dimensions of results, we can for sure support the decision-making of the oil and gas industry. So what we want to highlight here is that as much as the process is automated, is simplified, we can encourage more the application of our lifecycle sustainability assessment here and support our sustainable decision-making. With all what's happening around us right now, there is an urgency of sustainable and systemic actions. We have seen recently with what's happening with COP27, the latest UN report has confirmed that what we are doing right now is not enough to achieve the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement. And wide-ranging, large-scale, rapid, and systemic transformation is now essential to achieve the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement. And in order to do that, all actors have roles to play. When we say systemic transformation, this systemic transformation should not only be good on the environmental dimension, but should be also just and socially balanced transformation. So should handle the 3 dimensions of sustainability again. We cannot handle one environmental problem while creating others. This is something that we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. So this is where we can see life cycle thinking can play also a role in the decision-making of all actors that have to play their role in achieving the Paris Agreement. We have seen an increased interest in life cycle thinking, where all companies, like many companies, I should say, governments, academia, are seeing the benefits of the life cycle thinking. It's becoming more mainstream in different sectors, and it's simply a forward-thinking strategy. It can improve the overall sustainability of technologies, projects, products, companies, all our decisions. Leading businesses right now are moving beyond business as usual to create more a sustainable economy. Sustainable economy that goes beyond environmental assessment to cover the 3 dimensions of sustainability together. And it's now up to all of us as academics, as technology developers, as policymakers, as businesses, to as well play our role and make it changes in how we make or do decisions. It can be any decisions that you guys are making right now. It can be a project, working a project, making in academia, in technology development, in business. In any decision that we are taking, we can apply the life cycle thinking and cover all the 3 dimensions of sustainability together to have or to create or to improve the sustainable future for everyone. With this, you're going to see another poll, 2 poll questions popping up right now, where we would like as well to hear your inputs on what do you think would be the driver for integrating sustainability into your decision making. You can see some multiple options here where you can rank them from the highest to the lowest. And the other question, we would like as well to hear your inputs on what barriers can hinder your integration of sustainability into your decisions. And we have for you as well 3 options. And we will be again sharing the results of these 2 questions once we have them. Before we open the Q&A section, we just want to as well let everyone know that our upcoming webinar, Achieving Sustainable Development Goals in a Holistic Way with a Holistic Perspective, will be on January 25th. And you're going to as well have the link for registering in a follow-up email next week with the recording of this webinar, if anyone is interested also to attend this webinar. And as a startup, we are also planning an upcoming course as an introduction to lifecycle sustainability assessment. It's an online course that we are planning in spring 2023, where we have it's going to cover all the 3 tools of lifecycle sustainability assessment, how to do a lifecycle sustainability assessment from scratch, from the first point to the end. And if anyone is interested, you can follow our TOSA news to know exactly when this is going to happen. And if you are again interested in TOSA and what we are doing, feel free to visit our website and follow us on LinkedIn. And if you would like to as well know more about, interested to know more about TOSA, feel free to contact us using our email, and we would be happy to chat. For now, we can open the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to address any question.